Give one more minute, then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling here. This is Mark Gamble, Team PRP, Executive Director. Wanted to just touch base with the West members. I know some of you guys might be already members of the transportation group, and if that's the case, this will be redundant, but it will probably provide some help in that. Prior to this, we had a manual process where someone was kind of, you were able to grade the parts that you guys ship to each other through your LTL contracted carriers. What we're doing moving forward is we basically scrapped that manual process, in part for a couple of different reasons. Number one, it really wasn't getting done a whole lot, so the usage wasn't very high, and also it really didn't give us much information in the way of being able to kind of drill into quality, number of parcels that were being shipped, return percentages, and that's information that we use very heavily in the regular transportation network. Normally, when we have a transportation member that's a part of the group or part of the logistics network, they all have basically the Easy Runner subscription, and they pay PRP $450 a month to use that. And I've got Jim McKinney on the call today. He's going to jump into some of the scenarios. So what I had, Jim and I have been talking for a while, and basically I was looking for a version of this where you guys could use it in the West, very similar to what the transportation network uses it for, at a very scaled down cost, because we're not actually using it to track. It's just more of a process where you can ship to another Team PRP partner. You can receive the part. If there's an exception with the part, there's a drop down information where either the wrong part was sent, it wasn't up to standards, it was either broke, you can tell it was broke, prior to shipping, or maybe it was damaged en route. And then there's a return authorization process. So in putting this version together for PRP and the West members specifically, what we basically can do moving forward is we can find out, we can roll this data up on a monthly basis and compare it as a group, and we can share that back to you, and it's all automated, using Excel, using, the web, that kind of thing. So it just ends up being a much cleaner process, and one that we can track better, and we can provide more impactful information back to the facility at the facility level for you to review who your partners are, who you're trading with, how many exceptions you have that will help you improve your own shipping and packaging and things of that nature, and any other issues that kind of come out as a result of these monthly numbers. And it also allows you to kind of review the partners that you're trading with and their performance as well. The cool thing about it, the game plan is we're doing this today. It's May 21st. We're going to kick the program off on July the 1st. So after this call today, I'm going to send out an email to the group with the information that you'll need to make the contact to get a hold of the Easy Runner folks and be able to get set up. PRP will bill you directly, and the version that we're rolling out to you guys is only $50 a month. So it's basically what the transportation group is using. It's just obviously a scaled back version, just simply because you guys aren't using it to ship. We're just using it to provide management information on your parts and returns and things of that nature. So any questions so far? Okay. Jim, I'm going to flip it over to you. Why don't you just kind of walk through this for folks so that they kind of have an idea of how this thing works.
All right. Can you see my screen, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, good. So typically, this is an example shipment from Denton Auto Parts to Mill Iron Auto Parts. This automatically, we are integrated with Pinnacle, Hollander, and Checkmate. So when a shipment is ready, that information automatically comes into our system and it generates this tag you see here. And then it calculates, if you're on a transportation network, every stop off to the right here, every stop along the way until it finally gets to Mill Iron Auto Parts, in which it is scanned throughout the process. When a shipment is added, just like this one, you can take pictures of it if you want. So you have a good record of what it looked like before it left your place. And then when it arrives at the end yard, or in this case, throughout the process, pictures and documentation can be added anywhere along the way. For the West yards that are trading between each other via UPS and LTL, there will just be 2 stops, one leaving your yard, one arriving at the sell or the buying yard. And so you guys will have a couple of options. You'll either be able to, you can either click on the stop when you go to get it, and it'll allow you to receive it to show that you got it. Or if you want to buy a scanner, you can scan these as you receive them. Once you've received a part, if there's an issue with it, the only parts that get graded are parts that have some type of issue. You can do this in here on a computer, or you can do it on a tablet via our mobile app, and you simply add a grade. You choose if it was a carrier issue or a yard issue. For example, if you think it was damaged in transit, you would choose carrier. If you think it was something the yard did, you would choose yard. And then we have tiers that you can choose. So improper packaging, incomplete part, late part, not as described, so on and so forth. And once you choose the tier, then you can choose a sub tier. So I chose not as described, and these are, you know, the more detailed reason we can choose. More damage by 1 unit, 2 units, or 3, excessive rust, and so on and so forth. And you can also, you would also add photos at this time and put any notes in you want to put in. The other thing you guys will be able to do is return authorization, which is pretty nice. This is a way, if I've got the part and I want to return it to you, I can request that and you can respond. So if I wanted to request to return it, I choose a reason, and we have several in here that you guys, I'm sure, are used to, and request it. When I do that, it goes into an incoming request, which I don't have any here, an incoming request, and notifies me that, hey, they want to return this. Let me find an order here that has, and then there's communication back and forth. So here's one, the salesperson ordered wrong, and the supplier said, just credit it, I don't want to return it. And there's a picture in here as well. Credit it, no need to return it. So there's a few options here. You can approve it, which means they will then be allowed to generate a return tag and send it back to you. You can deny it, which means no, I'm not taking it back and I'm not giving you credit. Or you can say, credit it, I'm going to go ahead and credit it, no need to return it. So those are the options. In light of all that, I'm going to show you an example report of what we provide monthly for PRP that provides a lot of data. This again is Mill Iron Auto Parts. It shows my number of parts I sold versus what the average monthly sales are for PRP. So you can see that we are not a heavy seller. And then parts I bought compared to the average in PRP. And you can see here that we're a heavy buyer. So how many parts were returned to me, how many parts I returned, and those percentages. Number of my parts that were graded, and number of parts that I received and graded versus the PRP average. And we generated a quality percentage on that. Then return authorization, and how many we approved, how many were credited do not return, how many were denied, and how many were auto approved. Auto approved means if it sits in the system for more than 24 hours without a response, we automatically go in and approve that return. And then return authorization details. And this is very nice. The return reasons for my parts and return reasons for parts I return. So we have a high lost job, customer canceled. We might want to look into that. For the parts that we sent back, more damage than described was the number one reason we sent a part back. Then you get into some details. We didn't have any parts graded. If we did, it would show who graded it, the invoice number, the tracking number, and so on. So we can dig into what our issues may be. Return authorization, the same type of detail for parts that were returned to me, so I can dig, into individual returns and see if they did it right. We then provide a ranking that shows, your quality percentage versus your peers, return percentages, and so on and so forth against your peers. Then these are more used for Mark to evaluate, but we do a scanning percentage, something you guys probably won't need to worry about, that kind of thing. But that is pretty much the high level overview of how the program works. We will provide training probably in maybe 2 different webinars, depending on how many people need it. And I'll turn it back to you, Mark, or open it up for questions, actually.
Okay. Before we get to any questions, I just kind of want to just circle back. Basically, the advantage of what we have is it puts the entire Team PRP on the same platform. So it doesn't matter if you're part of the network or not, and you're still shipping to each other. It just allows us to be able to view these reports and group them in as a group. We talk about the packages that are shipped back and forth, when we talk about exceptions, when we talk about returns, and then when we talk about, just the quality. And based on what you just reviewed and your scorecard, so to speak, it gives you that data every month so that you can go into it and look at your exceptions, look at returns. A lot of times, obviously, in the return process, you pay for that shipping coming back to you or sharing that cost. This gives you the option to, in the example that was shown, is, I'll give you a credit, don't ship it back. I don't want that part back. In the network, it's pretty prevalent, and it's one of the things we try to discourage. And that was why we put the return authorization process in. So just something to think about. Like I said, we're looking to start the program on July 1st. So what I'll be doing is forwarding Jim's information on how to get signed up. We'll also do the training webinars to get your folks spooled up on how to use the system. It's a pretty easy deal. It's not difficult at all. And I think it'll prove to be just an overall better system than the one that we had before and that a lot of folks weren't even using anyway. And it gives us an avenue to provide, I think, good quality data back to the facilities and for the group as a whole to review and make improvements within your own group. So at this point, I'll open up for questions again and see if anybody's got anything for me.
Mark, is this going to be a system that everyone is using in the West, or is it an opt-in?
It's a system that we're all going to be using, so it's important that we all get on board with it, because if I've got just part of the group using it, it's really not effective. And because of that, it's kind of why I wanted to make sure that, Jim and I kind of talk through this version of it. And I wanted to be able to give you guys the best price. And that's why I mentioned earlier, folks that are on the transportation network are paying, $450. This version, provides a lot of the same data and benefits, and it's cost you $50, which is pretty much, in my opinion, it's kind of a drop in the bucket when I think when we're talking about what kind of benefit that we can see it from a group perspective. And I think it'll be well worth the return on investment for you guys individually to be able to have this information, kicked out to you every month and be able to refer to it both from a training perspective, but also, looking at the partners that you're trading within the group. So yes, I expect that we're all going to be on it and all going to be using it. And then I'll be able to track who is using it and who isn't. And that's kind of what I did when we, switched over to this a few years ago, or a couple of years ago with the logistics network, is we had folks that weren't using it. So I was able to pull that information every month and then remind them that, hey, this tool is there. It's not being used. You've shipped X amount of parts. There were either no exceptions reported, that kind of thing. And it allows us to kind of work with folks to make sure they get spooled up on it. Now, there have been cases where, you get people that use it and then you have some turnover in your facility or something happens and you bring somebody new in and that part of the training is overlooked. And then, but we're able to catch it within a couple of months. And then we're able to report back, touch base with the facility. They realize, oh yeah, we had a changeover. So-and-so left, so-and-so started, took over their job, and that was kind of left out of the training perspective. So it just allows us to kind of keep an eye on the folks that are using it and providing good metric data back to you. So the ones that are already part of the network and already have it, this isn't another version that you'll have to have. It all works in concert together. So for those of you that are on the network, I know we've expanded recently to Denver. So those folks won't need to purchase it again. It's not an additional $50 on top of what you're already paying. It's just merely a different version, but it all works in concert together. Any additional questions?
I have one question for Jim. How many users can be simultaneously logged in at my facility?
As many as you want.
Okay, thanks.
No limit.
Yeah. Anything else, guys? All right.
Hey, Mark.
Well, this was yes.
Mark, hey,
yeah.
do you want to, I don't know if you want to go into this or not on this call, but you want to kind of talk about how it's a little bit different, how we're running the trailer from Omaha to Denver than the rest of the trailer systems running. It's working fairly well. And there's potential that it could open up more other areas out of Denver, like Salt Lake or Phoenix or
well,
you want to bring it up, and the importance of this could be tracking numbers and start, having a goal to get to that point.
Well, I mean, Zane, why don't you talk, because you're familiar with the original logistics footprint and what we do. So the way the original, we've got 90 folks that participate in the logistics network. We use 2 contractors, Out of the Box and Midwest Trucking are 2 of the vendors that we use to transport parts all across the country. And it has, like I said earlier, it's got 90 folks. Now, when we did a recent extension into the Denver market, of which Zane was a part of, originally we had a truck running, but we were only doing a couple days worth of service, and it just became disjointed. So as working through some of those issues, we ended up hiring a third vendor that is handling the Denver extension of the group. And they're just paying for the use of that space, depending on how much they're shipping. So what we're finding is that has turned into a pretty good deal. And Zane, do you want to kind of expound on what you're seeing since we've gone to that full 5-day service with that vendor?
Yeah, I haven't really looked at the numbers, but I would say all the parties involved, the numbers are increasing. And with the COVID, it's kind of hard to put a real finger pinpoint on it because everybody's down somewhat, some sort of business. But the first month we run it, and it really worked. So they're running night shifts between Omaha and Denver. What we did is we piggyback off a common carrier, and we rented their truck space per linear feet, which we're loading in Omaha, going to middle of Nebraska, and the parcel codes that are unloaded and getting loaded, and then going on to Denver, where we potentially have Omaha to Denver, next day back to Omaha. We have next day delivery on parts. But it was a substantial cost savings of what we was looking at, and it's really working well. The freight carriers like it, for the yards like it. There's still a couple kinks on routing the parts that we're working to get worked out, but that stuff can get fixed. But the big thing was it was a substantial, to me, it was a substantial cost savings over what we was going to run, and makes it more affordable for everybody. And this carrier, we could link. Basically, we're using like their dock in Denver. We could link up maybe to Salt Lake City, to Phoenix with this carrier on the same type of runs. Look, we need to get a couple, 3 or 4 months under our belt to make sure it's all working right. Once we get this working right, there's a lot of potential to be adding to other markets coming out of Denver, coming into Denver, coming out. We've talked with Mr. R's about getting some of their product down to Denver and getting on the trailer. So I think that the reporting that they're talking about, this is the way it runs. And I think that in the future, there's going to be some opportunity to connect more of the West. We've always wanted it. We've never really had the opportunity, but that's something that as a West, we ought to be looking at or forward. And, the more people we can get involved, the easier it works. It should be a goal. And the grading and the tracking system that the Easy Runner has is how it works, how it flows. And I think it would probably be beneficial for everybody to get on that and, start kind of planning for that moving forward. That's what I think, Mark.
Yeah.
I don't know what anybody else thinks or has any questions or.
Well, and that's kind of what, from a big picture perspective, I've been working with the West group. There's, the 4 facilities in Arizona and a couple in Southern California. We've been working on maybe trying to get something up and running. I'm going to, as we end this first part of the call, anybody that wants to jump off can. And then I wanted to talk specifically with the Southern California yards that are on and the 4 Arizona yards if they're on. I wanted to kind of circle around that discussion as well. So I think with Zane, the way you preface that, and I think I've got to get agreement, but we want to, we're coming out of the COVID stuff. We're seeing a good solid 4 or 5 weeks of solid in increases in the parcels that are moving in the logistics network currently. So we know, and we've also been comparing that to sales data within the Team PRP group, and it's coinciding, pretty much in sync that we're seeing those increases both in sales and also in parcels. And I think it's going to continue to be that way as more and more states open up. So we're definitely, I think, going to see a consistent increase in the coming days and weeks and hopefully months as the economy kind of restarts. So as we do that, we're closely monitoring the growth and the volumes that are being moved through that third option that we recently implemented with the Denver group. So that might be a really good case as we look at that and we look at the cost of it and being able to piggyback that linear footage with another carrier. What Zane mentions with maybe potentially being able to link in Phoenix and Salt Lake and expand the network that way might be more viable than what we had originally talked about, just running something from SoCal to Phoenix and then working, organically from there. So I think we've got 2 different options, but I kind of want to give it another probably 30 days of review as we continue to come out of this so that we can continue to look at those parcel counts and separate them out and then compare the cost to that. And then I'd probably like to just swing back to the group as a whole in the next 1 to 2 months and propose that information and be able to say, okay, here's what we've got. Here's the parcels that are being shipped. This is what it equates to from a sales perspective, whether you're supplying or whether you're brokering. and then this is what your cost is. This is what your expense percentage is based on that sales that you're generating through the network. And I think in most cases you'll find that pretty significant. And that's kind of was another reason for the call today. It was to go over the switch, to give you the logic behind it, why we were doing it, what benefits that it provides. But it's also a precursor to us continuing to expand the network and give those in the West the opportunities that currently exist with everybody in the rest of the country that you guys haven't been able to enjoy. So that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what I think. That's kind of what I'm thinking from a future perspective. So I'm sorry, somebody else have a comment or question?
Yeah, it's Jim. This data I've got up here in regards to what you were just saying, Mark, this shows shipments for PRP by the week. So each of these lines, these bars is by the week for this year, and the line was last year's volume. And you can see this is the beginning of March right here, and where COVID hit, and now it's come back almost. This low line is this week, and it's a day behind, so don't pay any attention to that. But and this dip here is the holiday, so each of these are weeks that have a holiday. But it's another great tool, and we can look at all of PRP. You can drill down to your own facility, but it's a great tool to see what you're actually doing within the PRP membership. So kind of goes to Zane and Mark's point about the importance of the data and everybody being on one system.
Any questions about that or thoughts, or anybody want to contribute or think have an idea or think it's a good idea or think I'm full of crap?
So this is going to take, this is Steve, this takes the place of the old, the old grading system that we had that went out, up 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's great. We've always graded our parts, and we've always felt that grading our parts keeps us, holds us accountable. So I like this system. It looks like it has a lot more features than the old one, which was pretty rudimentary. So I like it. I'd like to see what kind of data we get out of it after we're all on it.
Right. And I think between now and the rollout, like I said, we're going to have additional information with the expansion into Denver. So as we do this rollout, we do the training, we'll have another one of these meetings probably this time next month, right before the kickoff. And it'll be nice to actually sit down and talk about what we've seen in that Denver market. And then, for the small group that we've been talking about trying to run that line back and forth between LA and Phoenix, basically we can have discussed probably 2 different options, and then look at the cost, look at the value, look at the ROI, and that gives you guys 2 opportunities to make a decision about how transportation can continue to impact your facility in a very positive way. So that's kind of what's been nice about this Denver, because we kind of went a different route. It's not one that we've done before. And so we just want to make sure we've got enough legs on it and days of running it to make sure that we feel comfortable with its viability as it grows and continue to service, just like Zane mentioned, the opportunity to maybe expand it organically from Denver into Salt Lake or into Phoenix. That could be huge. And then from there, it's just a matter of maybe expanding it a little bit more, putting a hub somewhere that we're getting it to the facilities for the rest of the group to be able to take advantage of it. So that's kind of the big picture piece. This is a smaller picture, but it's an integral first step in that process. So is there anybody from, I know Steve, you're on, is there anybody else from Arizona on, or anybody from Southern California?
I'm here, Mark. This is Rachel.
Oh, hey, Rachel. How's that? Does that sound okay? I mean, from a standpoint of, I know that, you know, we've had to kind of push the brakes on this a couple of different times, unfortunately. And the last break that we had to put on it was because of the COVID stuff and just the uncertainty of making that kind of an investment in the current environment. But I like the thought of being able to evaluate this Denver route, and then, you know, we can tie in this contractor to do many of the same things where we're actually just purchasing a linear portion of the trailer. You know, we can run that out, you know, that option out to pretty much everybody in the West, or expand it like Zane mentioned. Does that sound like that is worth a wait of maybe 30 to 45 days to see if we can make that a more viable option for you guys?
I mean, I would like to move forward as soon as possible, but obviously the long-term solution or long-term decision-making is always the best way to roll.
Okay.
So.
Well, coming out of the COVID stuff, I mean, I was hoping there'd be more of the, you know, the second part of the meeting is what I wanted to have this discussion with you guys, you know, the Arizona and Southern California folks. And I don't think Edgar's on. So it's kind of tough to have that conversation and you guys come to a decision when we've only got a couple of group on. But I'll see if I can't, you know, send an invite out for the 6 facilities that had been originally in that discussion, and see if I can get everybody on a call in the next week. I'll try to set something up for next week, and we'll kind of roundtable that and make sure everybody's on the same page. Or if we want to do something, you know, out of the gate to get that thing moving, and then work with the Denver extension as well on top of that. So I think that's at least worth having that discussion. But the idea here is I'll get the communication out back to you guys on the timelines and the information that you'll need to be able to hook up with Easy to get you guys set up, and then we'll set up the web training webinars for it, with the idea of the launch being July the 1st.
Sounds good.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
This is John from Transwest. Hey, make sure you keep us in the loop, whether it's down the road or soon, in Salt Lake at Transwest.
Okay.
But, remember also that if you get through Salt Lake, I mean, some of the routes in I-15, and those are all good things. We have great interstates from here to Denver, but you also access, we're super close to Shaw's, and they're an awesome yard. We trade with them a lot. So you get to Salt Lake, you also, it's like those are immediately accessed because Shaw's is really close to us. And again, we do tons of trading with them. They're an awesome yard. And so it's not just us in Salt Lake or in Utah. So they're basically in Utah. They cross over the border, but they're basically Utah. So.
Right. Yeah, that absolutely. So as we move through this process, you know, I want to make sure not only will I have a couple more teleconferences along this route, like what we just went through, but I'll be communicating via direct email to you guys, as well as some newsletter items, just to keep you informed and make sure that you're not missing out on kind of what's coming down the pike. So
great. Thank you. And just keep us in the loop. I'd love to be in the meetings just to learn how it's forming, and whether we're in now or in the near future, it's nice to know how it's forming up. So we
absolutely
would appreciate that.
You bet.
Hey, John, it's good to hear your voice.
It's good to be heard. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Well, listen, everyone, I appreciate your attendance. I'm certainly available via email or text. If you have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to contact me directly. I will be sending out that contact information probably by the close of, as we get closer to the weekend. You'll see a communication from me on the sign up for Easy Runner. And I hope everybody has a safe and happy Memorial Day holiday. So thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark and Jim.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.